Welcome back to another episode of Deckology, where this episode I'm going to somehow tie in Miley Cyrus's Flowers music video that just dropped over the weekend to my top 5 and only 5 floral decks. So within the music video and the song itself is there's a lot of Easter eggs about it. And I'm going to get into those in between each deck that I show you. So back in the day, Liam Hemsworth and Miley were married, and he dedicated a Bruno Mars song to her, and in which she's basically kind of like going back and forth between those lyrics and her new lyrics. So one of the main lines that Bruno says is, "I should have bought you flowers," to which Miley says, "I can buy myself flowers." Something Miley and I have in common is we both bought ourselves flowers. I can't take care of real flowers, but I can take care of these flowers. So on Friday, I got these in the mail. And this was on the same day, coincidentally, that Miley dropped her song Flowers, which at the time of recording this has about 28 million views. So just a few more than this episode's probably going to get. But I ordered these from Stefani Uniquities. You can see her on Instagram. She's got an Etsy shop full of just really cool little things that she does with cards. I saw these a couple of months ago, and Miley said, "Hey Tyler, I'm going to be dropping a music video on Friday. Maybe you should go ahead and get some." It's like this low-key collab, but it's whatever, you know? So the back of the deck is the Metalux version of the bicycle card, and it's red. And then the green for the little leaves is the green emerald version of the Metalux series of the bicycle deck. What I like about it is she packed them very well, and the stem is, you can bend the stem and it can kind of fit in a lot of different ways. So it's like this, I don't know what you'd consider this, but it's metal, but bendy metal, if that makes sense. So then you can kind of fit in a lot of different little jars. And this is just a jar that I had. I realized when I got these, I don't actually have anything to put them in. So I was like, I need to probably get a vase, but that's working out for now. And that's about the first flowers I've ever bought. So I was like, when Miley let me know that she was having a music video drop, I was like, cool, Miley, I'm going to buy my own flowers too. So I did, and I got them, and I love them. Fun fact about the video. She dropped that music video on Liam's birthday. Liam, her ex-husband. So that is clever and pretty fun. Let's get into one of the first floral decks that I have, though. So this is I'm probably going to butcher the name. This is the Paradolia deck. Paradolia deck. This deck of cards is pretty sweet. I got this straight from the source at CardistryCon, and I messaged. It was at the Art of Play Jam, and he was selling these cards, so I Venmoed him the money right then and there, and I got a deck. So that was pretty sweet. And that was Weston that I ended up buying him from. And Quentin Gardner, appropriate last name, did all of the illustrations. And so Weston did the concept and design behind this. So I messaged Weston and I asked him, I was like, hey, is there anything that I should know about this deck beyond the fact that it's printed in Taiwan? Told me that it's printed by Dex in Taiwan. That's DEX. It's a stock finish is the same as Becky's by Goose Cards. I don't think I've got any of those. The box is also a Taiwan version of the USPCC box and is not a regular box that they use. Any Taiwan Fontaine box sides, you'll see the difference. I don't know if I've got any, but anyways, it's a little bit different of a tuck case. And it's a very, very pretty tuck case, I might add. So lots of artwork all throughout this deck. 3 things that I like about this deck specifically are each time that you are doing a packet cut or you shuffle the cards, it's almost like you get a little bit of a surprise of oh, that's a different back. So there's no to say it's a one-way design is an understatement. It's just a designed deck. okay, it is technically a one-way design, but it is a very well crafted design deck that looks like it was just everything was painted or sketched on. So then when somebody's using this deck of cards and they're cutting it, it's kind of like you get to see different kinds of artwork each and every time that there's a cut or a fan or something happening to the deck itself. So the second thing that I like, beyond just the fact that it's like every time that you cut the deck, it's something different. It's almost something as if like these were, if you blew these up, they could be their own little painting or art piece. So I like that fact. I can't name any of the cards on the back, but they are all just different. I like that. And so the third thing I like about it is this is like 2A. Like when you fan it, you have like all these different colors that show up when you do one of these riffle fans or a regular fan. So I think that looks pretty cool too. It's almost like they leaned into the fact that there's not like a straightforward design. It is just the sheer fact that it is just artwork all throughout. And so I appreciate that. The last thing I like about this is print in Taiwan. And I like so if it's like any other Taiwan deck that I have that's printed, it's a little bit thicker, but over time it will, I feel like it just gets easier to handle over time, if that makes sense. It feels good out of the box. They are, like I said, a little bit thicker, but it gives it like for aerial stuff or flick stuff, things like that. Lots of resistance so that you can flick them and shoot them and do all that fun stuff with them pretty easily, but they fan very well. So another thing about this music video, I know, important, is, and we'll get into the next deck here in a second. Another thing about this music video is, so Liam was, I guess, training for a movie, and she's working out throughout the whole music video. She's not just working out, but she's working out pretty intensely. And one of the things that happened that probably, I guess, might have prompted a divorce was he would say he's going to the gym, but actually he was going to the house that he was allegedly having an affair with 14 different people with. So, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. So he was doing that when he was going to the gym. So of course, like, she's working out and at the house that he was having the affair at. Pretty sweet looking house too, I might add. Anyways, let's get into the next floral deck. So this is the Lavender Edition from Black Roses Playing Cards, designed by Daniel Schneider. If you are not sure who he is a pretty well-respected card designer. He has been designing cards for a hot minute and seems to really have a knack for it because he has a lot of decks of cards. So it's a USPCC stock. One thing to know about it is it has all the face cards are custom on this deck. So, and by custom, he draws his friends and people that are close to him on the deck itself. So like this King of Hearts, I don't know who this is, but whoever his barber is doing a great job because he's got a really nice fade. I don't know what he's holding either though. Anyways, the King of Diamonds, I did find out, is Daniel Schneider himself. So he's got him on a deck of cards, which is pretty sweet. I feel like it'd be really difficult drawing yourself on a deck of cards. I feel like I would really overthink that. I know editing a podcast where it's just me talking is difficult enough. I can't imagine drawing myself and then being like, yep, that's it. But maybe once you do, you're just good at it. I don't know. But it's a very magic heavy deck. So one thing that's kind of cool about that, I don't know if you noticed it, but he's actually holding a 2 of diamonds. So there's different ways to reveal cards throughout for the effects of magic tricks. But yeah, all the face cards are custom. The queen is holding a phone in one hand and a reveal, like 2 of hearts, in the other hand. So there are some cool reveals going throughout, and it looks like ice cream on the Queen of Diamonds. So that's one thing I do like about it. Now, another thing that I like about this card is the clear marking system. So there's a marking system on the back of these cards that you can look up. I feel like, I don't know if I'm allowed to, I don't know if it's within, if it's in the best practices just to reveal it. So but you can Google it and find it. But there is a really clear marking system on the back of the cards once you find it. So I didn't want to Google it. I just heard there was one. And so I started looking around. It took me probably 10 minutes to find it. But then once I found it, it became pretty clear. So real quick, this is the 6 of clubs. And this is, I was just making sure I was right. That would have been really awkward if I like built up how easy it was, and it was not. This one is the 4 of spades. Yep. And this one is the 2 of spades. Yep. Okay. And this one's the 4 of clubs. You get the point. It's once you see it, it's pretty obvious. And I think that's pretty cool. So like I said, with some of the reveals on the deck itself, like on the face cards, it's a cool way to implement a magic routine. Being able to read the back of the cards, that where I've had this deck for a while now, until I just did a little bit of homework on it, I didn't even see it. So it's very subtle. And then the third thing I like about this deck is how like elegant and the 2/8 elegant design of it. It's just like a really like if I were to have a purple deck, this is like the shade of purple I would get. I like how the borders have a border, if that makes sense. You can maybe kind of see it if you're watching, and if you're listening. Basically, he's got like a white line around the border, and then there's the border. So there's like a thin little thing. The whole deck is just very elegant. So that is another thing that I like about it. So speaking of elegant, so if you wear a suit like Liam Hemsworth did at a premiere for the Avengers movie with Miley, you might recognize that suit in Miley's video where she is dancing. And that suit, that jacket, is the same one that he was wearing at a movie premiere, where he told her, when she was misbehaving, he was like, "Can you just behave for once?" Let's get into the next deck of cards here. Now, I've talked about this deck before. This is the Dabs Miley deck from Fontaine. They did a collab. So the Dabs Miley deck is designed in collaboration with a husband-wife duo that does some incredible artwork. When I didn't know about them before this deck, and then when I looked them up, I'm like, hey, that looks like this deck. This deck, I didn't realize at the time when I got my first one, is a one-way design deck. So when you fan it one way, it's like this really cool looking fan, one direction. I like that. But it's also, if you mix it up, looks pretty normal. So it's like a subtle one-way design, if that makes sense. So there's different moves that you can do that definitely accentuate the fan display itself. And it looks great. It is like a piece of artwork when you are playing with this deck. So that's one thing that I do like about it, is like a deck that fans well, I'm a fan of. The second thing that I really like about this deck is the vibrant colors of it. And maybe there's a theme that like going on here, but if you like expanded this deck and you made it into a big art piece, whether the F's are there for Fontaine or not, this is something that I could see hanging up. There are uncut sheets of this floating around out there that if I were into collecting back then, I would have probably spent whatever I could have on getting that uncut sheet. They don't go for cheap because I think there's a very, very limited amount of printed. But regardless, it's on my bucket list of things to acquire. And then now the third thing that I like about this deck is the face cards are all custom, so that's its own thing. But what I really like is the subtleness of some of the clubs. So the face cards are cool, and I like definitely very well designed, and it speaks to like who they are as artists. And I think that's pretty cool that the way that they customized them in such a heavy, big, colorful way. I think that is cool. But there is something about the subtleness of those clubs that really just I love about it. Like when you just see little things like that you weren't expecting when you were originally going through the deck. That'd be the third thing that I really like about that, in conjunction with the custom face cards. The aces are really cool too. They did some pretty sweet artwork on the aces, and then they also did two ad cards that when you put them together, they create a bigger piece of art that looks something like this. So of space. I'm a fan of space, so automatically I was like, that's cool. I also want a big version of this as well, hanging up somewhere. This represents their style in a pretty cool way. Panorama is a particular importance of Dabs Milo's work. Micro points of view get referenced in larger scopes of vision, creating an interconnectedness amongst paintings both big and small. So when you take something small and then you put them together, you get a bigger piece of artwork. So being able to see that, that's clever. That takes some thought, and I appreciate that kind of a detail in their artwork. And you see that kind of all throughout the deck, especially with the fan designs, the way that it's smaller, like you just like, oh yeah, that's cool. But then when you fan it, it's like really cool. This one is, I figure this is also from Fontaine. This is from the Futures release. There is just a very subtleness to the red splotches on the side that made me think, oh, this is a two-way design. But then there's like the yellow, like the big obvious yellow splotch up top. Now I keep saying splotch. I don't know if there's a proper word for that for painting, but this too, similar to the Pareidolia deck, looks like it was just like hand painted on a canvas and put on a playing card. There is something, I think we're like seeing a theme here with like the hand painting thing like that. And then the last thing, there's no customization to the face cards besides the Ace of Spades, and which is like the signature. I love this Ace of Spades, the signature Ace of Spades from Fontaine, where they've kind of got the theme of the deck inside of the spade. You got a couple of ad cards. This is, I believe, one of 2,500 printed, so it's limited. Anyways, Fontaine Floral Edition. So this deck is from Dan and Dave in Dealer's Grip. They did a cool little collab, and they just starting at the tuck case, it's got like these raised little pips, you might say. I don't know. It's got these like dots on it. It almost feels like I don't know. There's a very cool texture to it. But also it's cut out here in the center. So that's pretty sweet too, because then it's the actual cards that are showing up in the center of this deck. So that's already just like the experience of opening the deck is pretty sweet because it's just different. So with this one, when you fan it one direction, when everything's in order, you get a really cool fan, both directions. So when you do one fan, you get like this pattern here up on the top. You turn it the other way and you fan it, and then you've got like a double version of something on the top. And then if you riffle fan it, you get a different kind of pattern that's showing up as well. And then if you riffle fan it the other direction, you get a like singular thing in it. So first and foremost, the design itself, that one-way design when you fan it, is one thing I just love about this deck. Second thing, the crush stock. I like thinner decks of cards that are like that, just a personal preference of mine. And then the Two of Spades has some like intricate artwork on it as well. I should have asked why that one. But then what I like is going back to the Fontaine dabs, how the face cards are cool and all, but I like the subtleness of different cards. So the way that you organize the pips on a card. So like this Seven of Spades has the spades going different directions and in a different order. I think that is really fun and different and cool. And I wasn't expecting it when I saw it. So it's such a easy way to like mix up a deck of cards. And I think if I were to ever design a deck of cards, I'd probably do something like that before I started really customizing the faces. Now let's get into the face cards of this deck. So it's done what I'd like to say is pointillism, I think is like the art name for it. It's all these little dots that are actually showing off some of Dan and Dave's moves. And it's probably a little bit hard to see on this camera. I'll take some photos and so you can probably see it a little bit better. But if you're listening, it's like pointillism is like when you just put a lot of little dots and then you look out like up close, you don't see much, but then you zoom way out and then you can like see the artwork itself. And that's what I think has been done to this. And so each of these face cards actually ends up having some different moves that are done. And I thought that was a really cool way to showcase some of the coolness that Dan and Dave has brought to the entire community. My overall takeaways are, it seems as if painting or like floral decks get pretty artsy pretty quick. And they also get pretty, if that makes sense. They're pretty decks. And the one-way designs create for a lot of cool opportunities with cool effects. And I also enjoy overall the customization has been done with the flower decks as well. So real quick to wrap this episode up, I feel like, I've got flower decks, but I also have decks that are technically plants. I just wanted to do honorable mentions real quick because I've got some more and I feel like I wanted to bring some kind of attention to them. And I've got 4 honorable mentions. I won't go into full detail of these, but I just feel like there should be acknowledged. So I got these are cactus playing cards, the Dusty Blue edition. Cactuses have cacti. They have flowers on them. So I was like, that's like technically a plant. And I've owned a cactus before, a small, cute little one, and it died. So that was a no-go for me. And then they also, from Cactus, they've got the red version of this deck. It's a little bit different. Almost kind of like takes like some notes from like a bicycle deck. But it's got a cool little, some cactus in the center there. And honorable mention number 3 is, I think, one of the first like cardistry decks I ever even bought is from Organic Playing Cards. And this is the Shuckers deck, which was a big venture out of what Organic Playing Cards normally does. But I figured corn is a plant, and like this deck, a lot of people aren't as big of fans of this deck as I am. It's hit or miss. I'm from Indiana, so corn is everywhere around me. And when you pressure fan this deck, it just looks cool. There's a lot about this deck that I just have been a fan of ever since. And it's actually one of the few, let me grab it. And it's one of the few half break boxes that I actually display. And that is a corn silo. So this is filled up with Shuckers cards on the inside. So of that, I still have. And let's get into my last one, and it's probably one of my top decks ever. One that I have been shamelessly asking people about if they've got an uncut sheet of it because I didn't buy it. And that is the by First Playing Cards V3 edition. It's got plants on the back of it. I feel like this one just has to be brought up if I'm talking about flowers. This not necessarily a flower, but there are plants. There are broken borders. It handles wonderfully. The gold foil on it is amazing. I know I said I wasn't going to get too in depth on these cards, but this deck is seriously one of my favorite decks of cards. Yeah, I'd really like to see one floral deck from Orbit. That's one that I'm a fan of Orbit decks, and it seems like whenever they do collabs, it's pretty sweet. So, Chris, if you're watching and you have a green thumb, maybe a floral deck from your company would be really fun. I think maybe like you could do like a circle with like the rose like it could be like a rose petal circle in the center or something like that, so that when you spin the deck, I don't know. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next week in the next episode of Deckology.